I used to think there was nothing my family could do that would surprise me anymore, but that was before the picnic. My name is Harper Lane. I am 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have been the one who shows up, the one who fills in the gaps, the one who brings calm to chaos that is not mine, the one who works 3 12-hour shifts in a row and still answers every call with "sure, I can." I pulled into Cherokee Park that afternoon with the windows down because the air conditioner in my car still sputtered like it was deciding whether it wanted to live or die. My scrubs were in the back seat, shoved into a plastic bag because I had just come off my third overnight shift at the hospital where I work as a night unit clerk. My eyes felt like sandpaper. I had not slept more than 5 hours in 2 days. Still, I showed up because that is what I always do. Their texts earlier in the week had made it sound like this picnic was some kind of family bonding moment, but the second I stepped out of my car, I knew better. My brother Derek was already cracking open a beer, leaning back in his camp chair like he owned the place. My parents sat under a canopy tent my dad had bought on sale years ago. Their faces lit up when they saw Derek. When they saw me, their smiles flickered the way porch lights do before a bulb burns out. My sister Lydia was arranging a table like she was curating a lifestyle shoot. She had a charcuterie board spread out in neat rows, slices of fruit placed at perfect angles, the kind of setup no normal family brings to a public park. She barely glanced at me, just made a small sound under her breath that might have been a greeting or might have been annoyance that I had not dressed up like she had. I walked toward them carrying the only thing I could afford after the kind of week I had. A grocery bag with chips and 2 bottles of off-brand lemonade. The handles cut into my fingers. I set the bag on the table next to Lydia's curated display, and she moved her expensive container an inch farther away, like my bargain food might contaminate it. My dad gave a short nod, the same one he had been giving me since I was a teenager. It translated to, "I see you, but you are not the reason we are here." My mom looked me over quickly, her eyes catching the dark circles under my eyes and the faded t-shirt I had thrown on. She sighed the way people do when they find a stain on something they thought was clean. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to get through 2 hours and then go home and sleep. The first hour passed with the usual routine, Lydia making comments about how tired I looked, my mom asking why I still had not found a daytime job, Derek laughing every time someone said anything at my expense. He had always been like that. Last year at Thanksgiving, he shoved me into the wall after getting drunk and insisting I had taken the last of the mashed potatoes, even though I had not eaten any yet. He called it playing around, but the bruise on my shoulder had stayed for 6 days. No one mentioned it. No one ever did. I had learned that bringing up the truth only made me look dramatic. The sun was sinking lower when Derek stood up with exaggerated effort, lifting his beer bottle like he was proposing a toast at a wedding. The glass clinked loudly as he tapped it with his ring. Everyone quieted immediately. It was almost funny how they obeyed him without thinking. Lydia lifted her phone just enough to angle the camera. My parents straightened like they were waiting for him to deliver a punchline. Derek smirked, a slow curl of the mouth he had been perfecting his entire life. A smirk that always meant something cruel was coming. He looked directly at me and raised his bottle. "Here is to Harper," he said. "The one who always shows up." A pause. He dragged it out like a performer milking the crowd. "The one who always shows up broke." Laughter erupted. Real laughter. My mom covered her mouth like the line was clever. My dad slapped his knee. Lydia giggled while watching my reaction through her phone screen like she wanted a viral moment. My ears rang. For a second, the world blurred at the edges. I thought of the months I had paid Derek's rent, the times I had sent Lydia money for her college fees, the emergency cash I had given my parents when their mortgage was about to default, the nights I skipped meals so they would not lose their house. All of it. And here I was, the punchline. I tried to swallow the humiliation, but it sat in my throat like something sharp. When Derek walked past me on his way back to his chair, he shoulder-checked me hard enough that I stumbled half a step. Not enough to call attention to it, but enough to remind me who he thought he was. Enough to remind me what he had done before. Something shifted in me then. Something small but solid. I straightened. My hands stopped shaking. My voice came out low, steady, not loud, but strong enough to cut through their laughter. They thought I would laugh it off like always. They thought I would pretend it did not hurt. They thought I would keep showing up no matter how deeply they pushed me into the dirt. They were wrong. I looked at each of them and felt something inside me click into place like a lock turning. They thought humiliating me would keep me in my place. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. They thought I would stay silent. But this time, I did not. And what happened next brought my entire family to their knees. I woke up the next afternoon with the kind of heaviness that settles into your bones before your mind even catches up. My alarm buzzed at 4:30, its dull ringtone echoing through my small apartment, the same one-bedroom unit I had lived in for 6 years, because it was the only place close enough to the hospital and cheap enough to manage while juggling bills that were not even mine. The sunlight through the blinds felt too bright, the air too still, and for a long moment I lay there staring at the ceiling and thinking about the toast, about Derek's smirk, about the laughter that followed me all the way to the parking lot. I should have let it go like I always did. That was the script. They mock. I swallow it, everyone moves on. But something was different this time. It sat in me like a stone. I pushed myself out of bed, feet touching the cold floor, and walked into the kitchenette where a half-empty bag of coffee grounds sat next to a chipped mug. I made the same cheap instant coffee I made every day before my shift and stood there holding the warm cup between my hands, letting the steam brush against my face. Sometimes I wondered what life looked like for people who woke up without dread, without the constant math running through their heads about which bill had to be covered first, whose emergency would take priority this week, how to scrape through until the next paycheck while pretending everything was fine. I pulled on my scrubs washed from earlier but still wrinkled and grabbed my purse. My car barely sputtered to life. The dashboard blared its usual warnings. Check engine, low tire pressure, oil change overdue. The kind of problems I kept putting off because I was busy patching up everyone else's holes. On the drive to the hospital, I passed the same row of houses I always did, families grilling on porches, kids tossing basketballs in driveways, people who seemed to glide through life without being drained by their own relatives. I used to imagine what that felt like. Not luxury, just normalcy, just functioning without someone tugging at you every time you tried to breathe. By the time I parked in the staff lot and walked inside, the familiar hum of the night shift steadied me a bit. The beeping monitors, the rolling carts, the nurses with tired smiles, all of it felt like something I could control, something I could handle, unlike my family. I clocked in and settled behind the front desk of the unit, checking patient charts, inputting orders, answering calls. It was routine, mechanical, almost soothing. But my mind kept drifting back to Derek's words, to the shove, to my mother's laugh, to the way Lydia lifted her phone like she wanted proof of my humiliation. Somewhere between printing lab requests and updating the bedboard, it hit me how deeply the pattern had been carved in my life. It had started when I was 16 and Derek crashed Dad's truck into a mailbox. My parents were frantic about insurance, and without thinking, I handed over the $500 I had saved from my part-time job. Dad had hugged me then, or something like a hug, more a side pat, and said, "You're a good kid." Derek never thanked me. Lydia acted like it was expected. I did not see the pattern then. I saw it as being helpful, being responsible, being the oldest. Then came college, community college, because I could not afford anything else. I worked night shifts at a diner balancing trays and wiping down tables, stumbling into class the next morning smelling like fry oil. When Lydia needed money for her senior trip, I covered it. When Derek's rent was short for the first time, I sent $200. When Mom's medical bill came out higher than expected, I took on a second job for a semester. And it never stopped. Not once. I learned to ignore the exhaustion, the resentment, the small voice inside me asking who was going to take care of me while I was taking care of everyone else. Over the last 2 years alone, I had paid 5 months of Derek's rent while he worked part-time at a bar and spent the rest of his time drinking with friends. I had paid Lydia's last semester tuition shortfall when she overspent her student loan refund on clothes and brunches she posted online. I had sent money for my parents' mortgage multiple times because Dad said he was between contract jobs. Every time I said I had it under control, even when I did not. Even when my account balance scared me. Even when I skipped meals to stretch groceries. Even when I pawned my childhood guitar to catch up on my own car payment. And yet, at that picnic, I was the one who showed up broke. The irony felt like a slap. Around 8 in the evening, I took my break and walked outside to the employee courtyard behind the hospital. I sat on a bench and let myself finally feel everything I had stuffed down earlier: the hurt, the anger, the humiliation. But underneath all of it was a deeper ache, a realization. They did not see me, not really. They saw my reliability, my paycheck, my exhaustion as something convenient for them, my stability as something they could cannibalize to keep themselves afloat. Every time Derek lost a job, I kept him from being evicted. Every time Lydia overspent, I bailed her out. Every time my parents missed a payment, I pulled them back from the financial edge. I had become their cushion, their buffer, the soft place they landed while I crashed on concrete. And when they toasted me like that, they were not mocking me for being broke. They were mocking me for being useful. They knew I would show up regardless. They knew I would swallow it. They knew I would keep paying. I finished my shift at 7 in the morning and dragged myself back to my apartment. I showered and watched the water swirl down the drain, thinking of every time I had tried to tell myself family loyalty meant sacrifice. But sacrifice only works when it is mutual. Mine was not. Mine had become a one-way current, pulling me under. Before collapsing into bed, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 voicemail from Dad, a text from Lydia that said, "Are you still coming to her baby shower next month?" even though she had spent the entire picnic laughing as Derek humiliated me. I turned the phone face down and lay there staring at the wall. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I was used to the constant noise of urgency, the constant pull of obligation. Silence felt foreign, but in that silence was a question I had never allowed myself to ask. What would my life look like if I stopped showing up, not out of spite, not out of punishment, just out of self-preservation? The idea felt dangerous, reckless, wrong, but also for the first time possible. I closed my eyes, letting exhaustion finally claim me. And the last thing I thought before sleep dragged me under was this. Maybe the worst thing that ever happened to me was realizing I had built my whole life around people who would rather break me than appreciate me. When I woke up hours later, sunlight warming my face and my phone buzzing again with another request for help, I did not know it yet, but I was 1 message away from changing everything. When I finally woke up that evening, the sky outside my window had gone from gold to a dull gray, the kind that makes you feel like the world is already tired before you even start your day. My phone was face down on the nightstand where I had abandoned it earlier, and for a few seconds I simply lay still, staring at the cracks in the ceiling paint and trying to gather the strength to sit up. I felt wrung out, like someone had twisted me from the inside. My head still throbbed from lack of sleep and emotional overload, a strange fog clinging to my thoughts. I reached for my phone only because habit told me to. 3 notifications popped up the second the screen lit. 1 from Derek, 1 from Lydia, 1 from my mother. 3 messages stacked in a row like demands lined up at a ticket counter. I opened Derek's first, even though I already knew the tone before I saw the words. Rent is due. Send the usual. No greeting. No question. No how are you doing after that humiliating spectacle we orchestrated. Just the usual. As if the last 48 hours had not happened. As if I existed purely to deposit money into the hole he kept digging. I closed the text without replying and opened Lydia's. Need 600. Tuition office says I'm short. You know Mom and Dad can't help. You're the stable one. You always fix things. She had added a sad face emoji, the kind she used when trying to fake vulnerability. My jaw tightened. I scrolled to the 3rd message. My mother. Honey, the mortgage is late again. Can you take care of it for us tonight? Dad said he talked to the bank and we are on thin ice. Please handle this before it becomes a bigger issue. Not a question. Not a request. Not even a small sign that she remembered the toast, the shove, the laughter at my expense. Just another task assigned to me like I was part of their financial infrastructure. My pulse throbbed in my temple. I set the phone down, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my own reflection. The person in the mirror looked worn, tired, drained. But there was something else, too. Something like the faint outline of a boundary beginning to take shape in the fog. I had thought being disrespected publicly would hurt the most, but this hit deeper. Not because they needed help. People need help all the time, but because they expected it. Expected it after humiliating me. Expected it after years of taking. Expected it without hesitation or hesitation toward my feelings or my humanity. They did not even pause. It was like they assumed I had no choice. I walked back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the 3 messages glowing on my phone. My thumb hovered. My heart pounded not fast but heavy, like each beat was pushing against years of conditioning. For a long moment I did nothing. Then I typed one word. No. I hit send before fear could talk me out of it. The word looked strange in the bubble. Foreign. Too small to carry the weight of what it meant. But it was real. It existed. It was out there. For the first time in my life, I had said no to my family. 3 seconds passed before my phone erupted like a fire alarm. Derek called first. I let it ring. He called again. Then again. Then the texts started. Are you serious? Rent is due now. Stop playing. Answer your phone. Then the anger. Harper, what the hell is wrong with you? You know I need this. Do not screw me over. Lydia's messages came at the same time, overlapping with his. What do you mean, no? Are you kidding me? I already told my advisor the money is coming. Do not ruin this for me. Mom and Dad will be furious. Then my mother. Harper, pick up the phone right now. I do not know what this little tantrum is, but you need to stop. This is not the time for attitude. We need your help. Dad just spoke to the bank again, and we cannot afford a missed payment. Do not make this harder. My phone vibrated so violently it almost fell out of my hand. I turned on silent mode and tossed it onto the comforter. My breath came out uneven. Saying no felt like stepping into a gust of cold wind barefoot. Sharp, exposed, dangerous, but also real. I stood, paced the apartment twice, sat down again, stood again. My nerves buzzed like I had drunk 3 coffees back to back. Then came the pounding. Someone hit my door loud and aggressive the way people do when they believe the person behind it owes them something. My stomach dropped. I already knew who it was. Harper opened the damn door. Derek's voice thundered through the metal. I froze. He pounded again, loud enough to rattle the picture frame on my wall. I know you are in there. Open. Up. My mind flashed back to that Thanksgiving night. Derek drunk, stumbling, shouting that I had taken the last of the food, slamming me into the wall so hard my shoulder throbbed for a week. He had apologized the next morning, not because he felt bad, but because Mom told him to. I took a step back from the door and grabbed my phone. Derek hit the door again. If you do not open this door right now, I swear to God I will do it myself. His hand hit the metal again. I sent a quick text to building security downstairs. Derek was still yelling. Open this door! You think you can just cut me off? You think you can just stop? You show up for us. That is what you do. What you are good for. That sentence hit harder than the shove at the picnic. What I am good for, as though my worth existed only in what I could give them. I stepped farther away from the door as the elevator chimed in the hallway. A firm voice echoed. Sir, you need to step away from the apartment door. Derek cursed, argued, stomped his feet, demanded they stay out of family matters. But the guard was steady. Sir, you need to leave the building now. This is not optional. Derek's voice faded, echoing insults as they escorted him out. I sank onto the couch legs, trembling, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. The apartment felt impossibly quiet once he was gone. I stared at the closed door and felt the tremor inside me settle into something else entirely. Certainty. Saying no had consequences, but enabling had consequences too, ones that had worn me down year after year until I hardly recognized myself. Derek's pounding on the door was not about rent. It was about control, about the expectation that I owed him, owed all of them without limit. And I finally realized that the moment I stopped paying was the moment they would show their true faces. I had seen enough in that single hour to understand something crucial. They would not stop taking until I stopped giving. And now that I had said no, once there was no undoing it. My phone buzzed again, softer this time. A new message from my mother. I hope you are happy. Your brother came home furious. We are dealing with enough without you adding to it. Come to dinner tomorrow so we can talk about your behavior. Your behavior. Not Derek's screaming at my door. Not Lydia's manipulation. Not the years of financial dependence they had created. No, my behavior. I put the phone face down again. Dinner would not change anything. But I already knew I would go, not to be scolded, not to be guilted, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to look them in the eye while standing on my own 2 feet. I lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet settle over me like a blanket I had never owned before. Whatever happened next, the line had been drawn. No was out there, and the world, my world, had just shifted on its axis. The next 5 days unfolded like watching a house of cards fall in slow motion. Except I was not the one pulling pieces out anymore. I was only watching, and for the first time, I let the pieces hit the floor instead of diving in to catch them. It started the morning after Derek came pounding on my door. I woke to silence. No good morning text pretending nothing happened. No apology. No update. Just a blank screen. I lay there in that quiet for a long minute, realizing how rare it was. In my family, silence did not mean peace. Silence meant pressure building behind a wall. It meant something was coming. I got dressed for my shift and headed out, nerves tight under my skin. As I drove, my phone buzzed twice in the cup holder. I glanced at it. 2 messages, both from unknown numbers. I pulled into the hospital parking lot and checked them. The first was a notice addressed to Derek, forwarded somehow to me. Past due notice. Eviction warning. Final 7-day demand. The second notice was a screenshot Lydia had sent to our family group chat. Tuition account locked for non-payment. Withdrawal pending. She added a caption. Really great timing, Harper. Glad your little tantrum is more important than my degree. My mother responded within minutes. This is exactly why we cannot rely on you for anything emotional. You only think about yourself. My father added a thumbs-down emoji, which somehow infuriated me more than actual words would have. I stared at the messages, feeling a strange mix of anger, disbelief, and something else. Something like clarity. Their world was crumbling, and instead of taking even an ounce of responsibility, they were looking for the same scapegoat they had always used. Me. I locked my phone, shoved it into my locker, and made it through my shift with a tightness in my chest that would not let up. Every time I paused to breathe, something new hit. During lunch break, I checked my phone again. 5 missed calls from Derek, 4 from my mother, 2 voicemails from my father, a text from my aunt asking what was going on because my mother had been on Facebook hinting her oldest daughter abandoned the family in their hour of need. That phrase made my stomach flip. Abandoned, as if I had ever been allowed to exist outside of their needs. After work, I sat in my car for a long time, staring ahead at nothing, letting the weight of everything settle. When I finally drove home, the sky was dark, and I felt even darker. The next morning, things got worse. My phone buzzed before I even rolled out of bed. 17 messages in the group chat, all accusing, all blaming. Mom had apparently told half the family that Derek might be evicted because I refused to help. She framed it as if I had suddenly turned cruel. No mention of the years I had covered his rent. No mention of the money that kept the lights on. No mention of my parents' mortgage that had been half paid by me for nearly 2 years. Someone had posted a cryptic status on Facebook. Nothing hurts more than being betrayed by the person you least expect. It had 3 likes already. I knew exactly who it was about. I closed the app and tossed my phone aside. A few hours later, I heard a loud thunk outside my door. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking Derek was back. But when I peered through the peephole, all I saw was a delivery envelope on the floor. It was addressed to me from the bank. That confused me at first. My name was not on my parents' mortgage, or so I thought. I opened the envelope on the kitchen counter. My heart sank as I read. Notice of pre-foreclosure courtesy copy to secondary guarantor. Secondary guarantor. Me. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Dates, missed payments, fees, warnings. A timeline that made my blood run cold. They had added my name last year, without telling me, without asking. My breath hitched. I felt dizzy. A cold ripple spread through my chest. I had been paying the mortgage because I thought I was helping them stay afloat, but they had actually tied me to the sinking ship legally. They had lined up the consequences so they would fall on both of us, and they had not said a word. Not one word. I sat down and stared at the papers, stunned. It was not just reliance. It was entrapment. The phone rang. My mother. I let it ring. It rang again. I answered because the rage had reached a level that needed an outlet. Mom's voice came through sharp and frantic. Harper, the bank called. She spoke like she was announcing the weather. The mortgage payment still has not gone through. Your father is at the office now. We need your help immediately. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. So, you put my name on the mortgage. There was a pause just long enough to say yes without saying the word. You knew we needed someone stable on the paperwork, she said in a defensive tone. Your father's contract work is unpredictable. Derek certainly could not sign. You were the obvious choice. You did not even tell me, I said, quietly. She exhaled loudly, like I was being ridiculous. You were helping anyway, so what difference does it make? The difference is consent, I said. The difference is you did this behind my back. Her voice sharpened. Enough. Are you sending the payment or not? No. The silence this time lasted longer. I could hear her breathing through the phone, shallow and edged with fury. If we lose this house, it is on you, she spat the words. It is your fault. Something inside me hardened like cooling steel. That is not my responsibility, I said. Figure it out. And I hung up. My hands shook for a long minute afterward, adrenaline shifting through my body. My phone buzzed again almost instantly. Dad, this time. His voice came in low and dangerous. You think you can walk away from this. You think you can quit on your family. I said nothing. If we lose our house, everyone will know it is because of you. You hear me. You. I hung up again. I stood in my living room feeling like the floor had tilted. My name on the mortgage, eviction notices, tuition lockouts, a collapsing system that had been held up by my labor, and now that I had stopped, everything they had stacked on top of me was falling all at once. But the more it fell, the more something inside me rose. Revelation. They never wanted me safe. They wanted me stable. Stable enough to save them. But only them. Around noon, I got another message from Derek, this time a picture. His front door with a bright orange eviction notice taped to it. Under the picture, he wrote one sentence. This is on you. I stared at it. My breath steadied. My heartbeat slowed. For the first time ever, instead of guilt, I felt clarity. This was never supposed to be my responsibility. Derek had not kept a job longer than 6 months in the last 5 years. Lydia had spent her loan refund on clothes and streaming services instead of tuition. My parents had bought a house too expensive for their income years ago and had relied on me to keep it afloat, believing I was their permanent safety net. I had become their structure, their scaffolding, their life preserver. And when I finally stepped back, they sank. Not because of me, but because they had built their lives with the assumption I would never stop holding them up. My phone buzzed again late that evening, my aunt this time. She wrote, "Your mother is devastated. This is not the time to punish them. You need to step up. Step up." The phrase triggered something deep in my chest. That was all I had ever done. Step up while they stepped on me. I put my phone on silent and curled up on the couch, letting the truth wash through me like cold water. I was not the villain. I was the illusion that kept everyone else from facing their consequences. And now that the illusion had collapsed, the truth was showing. Not about me. About them. The system had begun to fall. And I was not going to catch it this time. I drove to my parents' house the next evening with a knot in my stomach so tight it felt like it was pulling my ribs inward. The sky was a muddy blue, the kind that promised rain but refused to deliver it, leaving the air thick and heavy. I had not agreed to dinner. I had not confirmed anything. But my mother's final text had said be here at 7, as if I were an employee being summoned to a disciplinary meeting. The old version of me would have softened, apologized, scrambled to make peace. But I was different now, even if I did not yet know what that difference meant. I almost turned around twice on the drive. Once when I passed the grocery store where I had bought their groceries more times than I could count. Once when I saw the church where Lydia had performed in her school choir, a dress I had bought because Mom said they were tight that month. Memories kept swimming up like reminders of every time I had tried to be good. Good was killing me. I turned onto their street, slowly noticing what I had somehow ignored for months. The yard was unkempt. The plants my mother used to fuss over were wilted. The driveway had oil stains from my father's old truck. The house itself looked tired. The porch light flickered. I parked and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, grounding myself in the silence of my car before stepping back into the chaos I had finally begun to step away from. When I knocked, the door opened almost instantly, as if they had been waiting on the other side. My mother stared at me with an expression so controlled it was almost emotionless, like she had practiced the exact neutrality she wanted to convey. Her eyes flicked over my clothes, searching for some weakness. She stepped aside. "Come in." Her tone made it clear this was not an invitation. It was a summons. I walked into the living room and immediately I felt the distance. Not emotional, physical. They had arranged the dining room chairs so that the only empty one was positioned several feet away from theirs, like they wanted me close enough to scold, but not close enough to belong. My father sat at the table, arms crossed, his jaw tight, eyes refusing to meet mine. Lydia lounged on the couch with her phone in hand, scrolling like she had better things to do than be here. At the sight of me, she let out a long, exaggerated sigh. Finally! I forced myself to breathe evenly and sat down. It was not lost on me that even now, even after everything, I sat where they wanted me to sit. My mother placed a plate of reheated lasagna in front of me. I did not touch it. My father cleared his throat as if preparing for a business meeting. "We need to talk." I said nothing. My mother clasped her hands on the table like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. "Your behavior this week has been unacceptable." The words hit me like cold water. Not because they hurt, but because they were so expected, so rehearsed, so predictable. Instead of acknowledging what they had done, they were disciplining me. This was their pattern. I stared at my mother and said nothing. My silence seemed to irritate her. She inhaled sharply. "We are in crisis, real crisis. Derek is being evicted. Lydia's semester is at risk. Your father and I might lose the house. And you of all people have chosen this moment to be selfish." Lydia finally looked up long enough to add, "You always pick the worst times to fall apart." The room felt colder. My father leaned forward. "You have responsibilities as the oldest. Family responsibilities. Responsibilities." My voice finally emerged soft but steady. "You mean bills. You have financial stability," he said sharply. "You are the only one who can help. That is how family works." I let out a short exhale. Not a laugh, just disbelief escaping my lungs. Mom leaned closer, lowering her voice as if she were the reasonable one. "We raised you. We fed you. We supported you when you were young. This is how children repay their parents." My jaw tightened. "And what about how parents repay their children?" She blinked like she had never heard the concept. My father shook his head. "Do not twist this. You are being dramatic." Lydia interrupted, her tone sharp and smug. "You know we cannot do this without you. Stop acting like you are some victim. You love helping. It makes you feel important." That sentence cracked something open in me. I took a breath, tasting metallic bitterness on my tongue. I looked at each of them one by one, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for them instead of me. Then I spoke. "I have paid your bills for 2 years." The room froze. My father's expression flickered. My mother stared. Lydia's mouth parted slightly. I continued. "Derek's rent, Lydia's tuition, your mortgage, the utility bills, the credit card payments, all of it." My mother snapped out of her shock first. "You are exaggerating. You help, but not that much." I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I held it up and scrolled past a long list of transactions. Dozens. Hundreds. All labeled rent help or tuition or mortgage transfer. Their eyes followed the screen like it was a bomb counting down. My father's face turned red. He stood up abruptly. "You did this willingly. No one forced you." "True," I said. "No one forced me. But where in all of that did any of you stop and ask how I was doing?" My voice wavered, but not from weakness, from rage that had been simmering under my skin for years. "You did not want my well-being. You wanted my paycheck." They all stiffened. For the first time ever, they were hearing the truth. My mother softened her tone like she always did when manipulation did not work. "Honey, we thought we were a team. A team," I repeated. "I pay and you laugh at me in public. That is not a team. That is exploitation." My father slammed his hand on the table so hard the plate rattled. "Enough. You owe us respect. You owe us support. That is what family means." I stood up slowly. "No, I do not owe you my life." Derek burst in from the hallway. I had not even realized he was there. His eyes were glassy with anger, his breath heavy. "This is unbelievable! You put us in this mess! You think you can just walk away!" He stepped toward me, his posture aggressive. Lydia's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. My father did not stop him. My mother did not intervene. Derek grabbed my forearm hard enough that pain shot up the inside of my elbow. "You are not doing this to us. You hear me." For a second, fear flashed through me. Not because he had never touched me like that before, but because he had. The memory of being shoved into the wall last year, the bruise that bloomed purple for days, the silence from everyone afterward, all of it flickered behind my eyes. But this time, I was not the same person. I jerked my arm out of his grip sharply. "Do not touch me." Derek blinked, startled. My father finally reacted, but not in the way a father should. "Sit down. You are causing a scene." My mother whispered, "Harper, stop being difficult." For a moment, everything felt suspended. No sound. No breath. Just the weight of decades pushing down on my lungs. Then clarity cut through it. I said the words that had been building inside me for years. "I am not your safety net anymore." The room went still. Silent. Dead silent. They stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language, like I had severed a cord they never believed I would cut. Lydia finally broke the quiet. "You cannot just decide that." I met her eyes. "I already have." My father looked stunned, offended, betrayed. My mother's face crumpled into anger she tried to disguise as hurt. Derek looked ready to explode again. I stepped back. I grabbed my purse. I walked to the door while they continued calling my name, demanding I sit back down, accusing me of heartlessness and abandonment and selfishness. But their voices sounded far away like echoes from another life. When I stepped outside, the evening air felt colder than before, but cleaner somehow. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat in the driver's seat. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. From freedom. I put the key into the ignition and whispered to myself almost in disbelief. I finally did it. I drove away from the house that had taken so much from me. And for the first time, I did not look back. The silence that followed the confrontation dinner was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that buzzed like a live wire with a frayed end sparking in the dark. It settled into my apartment, into my chest, into every thought I tried to distract myself with. I had expected rage. I had expected constant calls, threats, guilt trips. But instead, my phone stayed still. Not quiet. Still. A different kind of danger. I tried to sleep when I got home, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's hand clamped around my arm. The wild flash in his eyes, the look my father gave me when he slammed his hand on the table like I was the problem. Around 2 in the morning, I finally drifted off, but even my dreams were sharp. I dreamed of the picnic again. Derek's toast echoing across the park, my mother's laughter rising above the sound of rustling leaves. I dreamed of the shove of my back hitting a wall, of falling alone while everyone else watched. When I woke, just before noon, my heart was racing. I sat up fast, breath catching in my throat like I was still running from something. I looked around my small apartment, the blinds slicing sunlight into pale stripes across the floor, and I reminded myself out loud, quietly, I am safe here. No one is here. But the silence did not bring calm. It brought anticipation, dread. My phone lit with one notification, and it was from my cousin Jeremy. Not my family, not my parents, not Derek. Just Jeremy, the family gossip who always sensed drama the way sharks sense blood in the water. You okay? I heard yelling last night. I stared at the message. He lived 2 blocks away from my parents' house. Of course he heard. Of course the neighborhood grapevine was awake before I even opened my eyes. I didn't answer. I showered, letting the hot water hit my shoulders until my muscles loosened and made myself coffee. For once, the apartment felt like it belonged to me, instead of being a staging area before another crisis. But mid-sip, my phone dinged again. This time, a Facebook notification. My mother had posted something, a long, dramatic paragraph about how heartbreaking it is when children forget the sacrifices their parents made. She did not name me, but she didn't have to. Half the people in her friend circle had commented things like praying for you or kids these days have no gratitude. I set my mug down so hard the coffee sloshed over the rim. I opened the post, then closed it immediately. I would not give her the satisfaction of a view. The second wave of retaliation arrived at 2:30 when I was folding laundry. A text from a number I did not have saved. Thought you should know your family is online talking about you. It was someone from the church my parents used to drag us to. Then another message from an aunt I had not spoken to in months. Whatever you are going through is no excuse to abandon your family. I ignored them all, but the messages kept coming. Not calls, messages. Cowardly, indirect, delivered like little stabs meant to make me flinch without anyone taking responsibility. Around 4, Derek finally spoke up. He posted a vague status. Some people only show up when things are easy. Real family doesn't quit when things get tough. He attached a picture of his eviction notice. I felt heat claw up my throat, anger mixing with disbelief that he would paint himself as a victim when he had not held a steady job, had not taken accountability for one thing. In years, had pounded on my door like I was his personal ATM throwing a tantrum. My fingers hovered over my screen. For a moment, I wanted to comment, to expose everything, to defend myself. But then the truth hit me. I did not owe the internet an explanation. I owed myself peace. I put the phone down and stepped away. I decided to go for a walk. The sun was dipping lower, streaking orange across the sky, and I walked around my neighborhood until my breath steadied. When I returned home, the silence still felt heavy but bearable. Until 8:30, when someone knocked on my door again. My entire body locked up, adrenaline bursting through my chest. For 3 seconds, I could smell the stale beer Derek always carried on his breath. I could hear the anger in his voice from the night he grabbed my arm. I approached the peephole slowly, each step heavy. But it was not Derek. It was a police officer. I opened the door cautiously. Harper Lane. Yes. He checked his notes. We received a report earlier this evening. A man called saying you stole property belonging to your brother, specifically his wallet, a set of keys, and a credit card. My jaw dropped. I stared at him. The officer continued. Do you have any items belonging to him? No. Absolutely not. The officer paused, studying me, reading something in my expression. Okay. His tone softened slightly. Do you mind if I ask you when you last saw him? I took a breath. He came here 2 nights ago, pounded on my door, threatened me. Security escorted him out. The officer nodded slowly. That tracks with what the other guard reported. He looked at his notes again. His accusation doesn't hold up, but we still needed to follow up. I appreciate you answering the door. He handed me a card. And if he shows up here again, call us immediately. My hands shook as I closed the door. Derek had called the police on me. Lied. Tried to paint me as the criminal. That realization hit deeper than the shove at the picnic, deeper than the bruise last year, deeper than the toast. It meant he was capable of anything if it meant regaining control. I sank onto the couch again, hands pressed against my forehead. My heart raced. My thoughts tangled. What else would he do? What else would they blame me for? I turned off every light in the apartment and sat there in the dim glow of the lamp, trying to steady my breath. At 10, my phone buzzed again. My mother. Her text read, "We heard police were at your place. Stop making things harder. Come home tomorrow. We need to fix this mess you created." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Police at my place. Fix this mess you created. As if I had not been the one threatened. As if I had not been the one protecting myself. As if I had not spent years holding them together financially and emotionally while they took and took and took. Something inside me snapped, not in an angry way, in a final way, like a rope that had been fraying for years and finally gave way. I blocked my mother's number, then my father's, then Lydia's. Derek was already blocked. For the first time, my phone was truly silent. No buzzing, no calling, no guilt, no demands, no claws reaching for me from every direction. The silence felt strange at first, like standing in a room after the music suddenly cuts off. Unsteady, disorienting. But slowly, inch by inch, it transformed into something else. Something like clarity, like space, like the beginning of a life that had room for me in it. I went to bed with the phone on silent, the lights low, and an unfamiliar thought settling over me. My family was retaliating because I had finally broken the cycle. I was no longer playing the role they had written for me, and the more they pushed, the clearer everything became. They were not falling apart because of me. They were falling apart because for the first time they had to stand on their own legs, and none of them knew how. The email arrived at 9:40 on a Thursday morning while I was still half asleep, drifting in and out after another restless night. The subject line did not look urgent at first glance, just a bland automated notification from the bank, the same institution that held the mortgage for my parents' house. I almost deleted it without opening, but something made my thumb pause. Maybe the lingering dread from days of silence, maybe the instinct you get from being the responsible one for too long. I tapped it open and the words blazed across my screen. Pre-foreclosure warning, immediate attention required. My stomach dropped so fast I felt physically dizzy, as if the floor tilted underneath me. I sat up straight in bed, pulling my blanket tighter around my shoulders, even though the room was warm. I reread the message 3 times. The house was behind on payments by nearly 4 months. 4. When I took my own name off the utility bills 2 months earlier, I had thought it would force them to take control. I never expected they were already sinking. Beneath the notice was a statement showing every missed mortgage payment, every late fee, every financial red flag they had ignored. And there it was in stark, cold text. Co-signer. Additional responsible party. Harper Lane. My name. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my pulse beating hard in my temples. I thought I had stepped out of the cycle. I thought blocking their numbers meant freedom. I thought silence meant distance. But the truth landed like a stone in my chest. I was still tied to them. Legally. Financially. On paper, I was still responsible for them, even when emotionally I had cut the cord. My breath came short the way it had when the officer stood at my door 2 nights earlier. The room around me blurred until I blinked hard. I threw back the blanket, got out of bed, and paced the apartment with the phone in my hand as if I could walk away from the problem by wearing grooves into the floor. Memories flashed quickly, too fast to control. The day my mother asked me to co-sign. The way she cried. The way my father said, "You will help family, won't you?" The guilt, the pressure. The lie that it was only temporary. I felt sick. I sat on the edge of the couch and reread the email again. The house was at risk of entering pre-foreclosure proceedings within 60 days if immediate payment was not made. My phone buzzed, suddenly vibrating so hard it startled me. The caller ID flashed my father's name. For the first time in days, they were reaching out directly instead of passive-aggressive posts and flying monkeys. My hand hovered over the screen. I did not answer. 30 seconds later, my mother called. Then Derek. Then Lydia. The silence I had created broke open like a dam, and every call they had been holding back came flooding at once. I let every call go to voicemail, my throat tight. After 10 minutes, the messages began arriving. First, from my mother. "Harper, we need to talk right now. Harper, this is serious. Please, answer." Then another. "You cannot ignore this. We are in trouble and we need you." Then my father. "Do the right thing. You signed for this house. This is on you whether you want it or not." My hands shook as I scrolled. Lydia's text came next. "Can you please just help one last time? I am so stressed. I cannot deal with this too." And finally Derek's voice message. Angry, sharp, spat between clenched teeth. "If we lose the house, it is your fault. You hear me? Your fault. Answer your damn phone." I pressed my lips together, tasting bitterness, anger, and something else. Something like grief. They did not ask if I was okay. They did not acknowledge the lies the police call the harassment, the shove at the picnic, the years of financial dependence they had built around me like a cage. They did not even try to apologize. All they cared about was the house, the mortgage, the thing they expected me to fix. Again, a dense pressure built behind my ribs. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water, my hand trembling as I lifted it. I was shaking so hard I had to set it down. They were drowning, and instead of learning to swim, they were trying to pull me under with them. The realization hit me with a clarity I had never felt before. They did not want me. They wanted what I could give them. I sat back down on the couch and opened the voicemail app. I listened to Derek's message again, letting his words play in my mind with a new kind of distance. His threats no longer landed. His anger no longer cowed me. It sounded hollow now, desperate. Like a man who had relied on someone else for so long, he no longer knew how to function on his own. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. "Harper, this is Linda from Valley Trust Bank. We have been unable to reach your parents. As a co-signer, we need to verify your awareness of the situation. Please call at your earliest convenience." I stared at the message. My chest tightened again. I knew what the bank wanted. They wanted reassurance that someone in the equation was responsible. They wanted someone who would take action, someone who would pay, someone who would clean the mess. For years, that person had been me. I set the phone face down on the couch and pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes. I breathed in deeply and slowly. When I opened my eyes again, the apartment looked exactly the same, but something inside me had shifted. I was done being the solution to problems I did not create. I walked to my small desk in the corner, sat down, and opened my laptop. I typed, slowly, carefully weighing every word. "Dear Linda, thank you for your message. I am aware of the situation. I will not be making any payments on the mortgage. All inquiries should be directed to the primary owners. Regards, Harper Lane." My hands were steady when I pressed send. A stillness settled over me. Not the frantic silence of retaliation, not the buzzing silence of dread. A quiet one, a firm one, a final one. I checked my phone again. More messages from my mother. "You do not understand what will happen. You cannot let this go. You are ruining us." Then my father. "You will come here tonight. We will settle this as a family." Then Lydia. "Please think about us. Stop being selfish." Selfish! The word burned. I turned the phone off completely and set it aside. I walked to the window and pulled the curtains open, letting sunlight spill into the room. The trees outside swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time in a long time, I felt grounded in a moment that did not belong to them. They were facing consequences, not because of me, but because for the first time they were standing without me holding them up, and that scaffolding they had leaned on for years had never been built to carry their weight. The pre-foreclosure notice was not the beginning of their collapse. It was the moment their collapse finally became visible, and I felt something like relief wash through me. Heavy, sad, complicated relief. They were falling, and I would not break my back catching them this time. I chose the same park on purpose. Cherokee Park, the same patch of open grass, the same wooden shelter with the peeling green paint. The same picnic tables where everything had unraveled just weeks before. The memory of Derek's smirk still floated in the air there, the echo of his words still hanging like humidity. To the one who always shows up broke. I had replayed that moment so many nights that it had carved a groove in my mind. But this time, I walked toward the spot with steady steps and a clear purpose. The air felt lighter. The sun was sharp and bright, the sky a wide stretch of clean blue. I arrived early. I wanted the space to myself before they showed up so I could breathe, so I could take control of the scene before they tried to twist it in their favor. I sat at the furthest table and placed a simple folder in the center. Cream-colored, thick paper. Clean. Not heavy in weight, but heavy in meaning. Inside was everything. Job listings, contact forms, financial guidance referrals, community programs. Nothing insulting, nothing cruel, just solutions. Actual, viable solutions. The proof that I was not cold or selfish or abandoning them. The proof that I was giving them exactly what they kept demanding from me, help. Just not the kind they wanted, not the kind that drained me dry. I heard their voices before I saw them. Derek's first loud and irritated. Lydia's soft muttering behind him. My mother's high-pitched fretting. My father's gruff rumble. They approached like a storm cloud sweeping across the grass in a cluster of resentment. When they reached the shade of the shelter, everyone stopped a few feet away from me. My mother was the first to speak. "What is this about?" Her tone was clipped as if she had something better to do, as if she had not spent days leaving voicemails where she and my father begged, threatened, blamed, accused. Lydia folded her arms like she was cold. My father's jaw clenched. Derek scoffed loudly. "Harper! I swear to God, if this is some dramatic apology thing, get it over with." I ignored him. I nodded toward the table. "Sit." They hesitated, exchanging glances, confused, suspicious. My father grumbled, but sat first, followed by my mother, then Lydia. Derek stood with his arms crossed for another long moment, as if refusing to bend, then gave in and dropped onto the bench with a loud thud. I kept my voice calm, even steady. "You wanted help. So I brought help." Derek rolled his eyes. "We need money, not whatever this is." My mother hissed his name under her breath, but did not disagree. Lydia leaned forward a little. "What is that?" I tapped the folder with 2 fingers. "This is everything you need to fix your own mess." The table fell silent. They stared at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. I opened the folder slowly and slid the first set of pages toward Derek. Warehouse jobs, logistics assistant positions, security guard openings, HVAC trainee programs, all entry level, all honest work, all full-time with benefits. I placed them neatly in front of him. His face darkened immediately. "What is this supposed to be? These are jobs you qualify for." I said it gently, not mockingly. "You need income. These places are hiring." His hands curled into fists on the table. "You think I am going to work in a warehouse. You think I am going to wear some vest and move boxes all day." My father inserted himself with a low growl. "He deserves better than this." Derek nodded aggressively as if waiting for me to back down. "I did not. It is work. Stable work. It would keep you housed. It would keep you afloat." Derek shoved the papers across the table and they fluttered onto the ground. I did not flinch. Instead, I turned to Lydia, I slid her packet forward. Medical office receptionist positions. Daycare assistant. Clinic intake coordinator. None glamorous. All realistic. All reachable. Her eyes widened. She looked from the papers to me, insulted. "I am supposed to answer phones and wipe children's noses." I held her gaze. "You need something stable, something that gives you experience, something that pays." She shook her head, eyes glossing with angry tears. "I am in school. I am trying. You dropped your classes, Lydia. Your financial aid is gone. This is what you qualify for right now." Her lip trembled before she masked it behind anger. My mother reached for her hand like I had attacked her. My father glared at me as if I had bruised his pride instead of offering a solution. I kept my breathing slow. I slid the final papers toward them. senior community volunteer programs that offered stipends, mortgage counseling services, financial literacy classes. They stared down at the papers as if they were poison. My mother shook her head. "This is humiliating." My father slammed his palm on the table. "We are not charity cases." I met his gaze. "You expected me to be your charity for the rest of my life." He opened his mouth to argue, but I placed both hands flat on the table. "You asked for help. This is help. Real help. Not handouts. Not bandages for problems you refuse to fix. Solutions." Derek leaned forward, pointing a finger at me. "You could end all of this right now by paying the mortgage. You could stop being dramatic and just do your part." I felt that old familiar tug, that instinct to flinch, to fold, to apologize for even existing, but it never reached me this time. I stayed still. I already did my part. For years. I already rescued you. For years. I am done. His face twisted. He stood abruptly, the bench scraping against concrete. He grabbed the folder, flung it toward the ground, and papers scattered across the grass like shaken birds. A few people nearby turned to look. My mother gasped softly. Lydia cursed under her breath. Derek took 2 aggressive steps toward me, his posture tight, his shoulders squared, like he wanted to physically intimidate me the way he always had. I stood before he got too close. My voice was steady. "Do not touch me." The words stopped him, not because he respected them, but because there were witnesses. Because this was not a dim hallway or my parents' kitchen. This was a public park full of families and joggers and older couples walking dogs. People who would not look away if he grabbed me. He sneered. "You are acting like the victim." I did not blink. "I am not acting." I picked up the folder calmly, not bothering to gather the scattered pages. It did not matter anymore. I had delivered the truth. They chose to reject it. I stepped back from the table. I expected shouting. I expected someone to follow, but they all stayed sitting, staring at me as though I had grown impossible to understand, like I had become a stranger. Or worse, someone they could no longer control. I looked at each of them carefully, not with anger, not with pity, with clarity. You are adults. Your lives are your responsibility, not mine, not anymore. My mother whispered my name like a plea. My father's face looked ready to split with rage. Lydia looked betrayed. Derek looked like he wanted to break something. I felt none of it. I felt weight lifting off me. Their reactions were not my burden. I turned and walked away. The sunlight warmed the back of my neck. The sound of kids playing nearby drifted on the breeze. I kept walking until the shelter was far behind me. I did not look back. For the first time in my life, they had to face themselves without using me as a shield, a wallet, a scapegoat, or an emotional punching bag. And for the first time, I was walking into a future that belonged only to me. In the days after the second picnic, the air around me felt different, almost like stepping out of a long storm and realizing the ground underneath is finally drying. I waited for the uproar, for the endless calls, the guilt-soaked messages, the accusations that usually followed any moment I dared to set boundaries. But instead, there was a strange, eerie quiet. It was the quiet of something beginning to collapse in the distance, a rumble you could feel before you could hear it. I knew what was coming. I had felt it building for years, like cracks forming beneath the surface of a sidewalk no one bothers to repair. And sure enough, the first real fracture arrived 3 days later in the form of a text from Derek. Or, more accurately, a photograph. An eviction notice taped to his apartment door, the stark red letters shouting "Final Warning." Beneath the photo, his message read, "Hope you're happy. You did this." Not a single acknowledgement that he had ignored job applications for months, that he had spent more on beer than groceries, that he had relied on my money like it was a basic right. Not even a flicker of accountability. I didn't respond. I stared at the message for a moment, then locked my phone and placed its screen down. I was not responsible for the consequences he created with his own hands. A day later, Lydia posted something vague and tear-stained on her Instagram story. A close-up selfie mascara streaked captioned with the words, "I do not know how my life got this bad. I am trying, I really am. But everything is falling apart. Anyone else would have thought she was heartbroken over a breakup or a failed exam. I knew better. That was the face of someone who had finally been dropped from her classes officially. Financial aid revoked, status withdrawn, academic standing lost, and without student status, all the social privileges she clung to disappeared. She was no longer the girl heading toward a degree. She was the girl who missed too many deadlines, ignored too many bills, and depended too heavily on someone else's money. Again, she did not reach out to me directly. She only posted for the world to see, hoping sympathy would flood in. I didn't engage. I didn't repost. I didn't reply. I didn't save her from the spotlight she put herself under. 2 days after that, the consequences reached my parents. This time, in a far more tangible way. I received the notice first because the bank still had me listed as a secondary contact. An automated update informing me that the mortgage account had progressed from delinquent to pre-foreclosure review. I stared at the notification while sitting on my couch with a bowl of cereal that suddenly felt too heavy to swallow. There it was, the result of years of denial, years of overspending, years of choosing vacations, new furniture, and gifts for Derek over paying bills, years of expecting me to be the safety net. My phone rang 10 minutes later. My mother. I ignored it. Then my father called, then Lydia, then Derek. I let every call fade out unanswered. My voicemail pinged instantly after. My mother's voice cracked through the speaker in a wobbly mix of panic and outrage. "Harper, listen. We need to talk." The bank called. "They are saying things that cannot be right. They are saying we missed payments, that the house is at risk. This is ridiculous. Call us back now." Another voicemail, this time from my father. "You better come here and explain what you did." His voice was sharp, biting the same tone he used whenever bills arrived in the mail, and he automatically assumed I would fix them. Not a word about responsibility, not a mention of their choices. To them, it would always be my fault when the world stopped cushioning them. I turned my phone off. I didn't owe them explanations. Not anymore. What struck me in those following days was not the panic they felt. It was the way people around them began to see the truth. Consequences have a way of revealing character, and when the bills piled up, when the bank letters arrived, when the landlord warnings turned into final notices, people who once pitied them or believed their version of events suddenly saw cracks in the story. My Aunt Karen texted me one evening. "Haven't heard from your mom in a few days. She mentioned something about the house." "You okay?" That question stunned me. "You okay?" No one in my immediate family had ever asked me that sincerely. And now, here was someone from the outside looking in, sensing something was off in the dynamic. I replied simply, "I'm all right. Things are unfolding the way they need to." She sent back a single message. "I figured as much. If you want to talk, I'm here." It was small but meaningful. People were beginning to see that my family's version of reality did not match the facts. And the universe had one more twist waiting. The truth always finds daylight when people stop holding umbrellas over it. One morning I received a message from a coworker who knew my sister through mutual friends. "Thought you should know people are talking about what your parents put you through. Apparently, Lydia told someone you paid their bills for 2 years." I froze. Lydia. The same girl who filmed Derek toasting me with that humiliating line. The same girl who called me selfish. She had slipped. Maybe out of stress. Maybe out of self-pity. Maybe someone asked her how things got so bad and she blurted it out. But once she said it, the story spread. It only took 24 hours before the whispers reached all the way back to my parents. My phone lit up with a wall of messages. Not accusations, not threats, not demands, but fear. From my mother. "People are calling us. They're saying things. Who did you tell?" From my father. "This is embarrassing. Fix it." Derek took a different angle. "I swear if you turned people against us, I am done with you." I took a slow breath. They were unraveling not because of anything I had done, but because the truth was leaking out through the cracks they created themselves. People were finally seeing who held the weight in the family, and it was not them. Another wave of consequences hit soon after. Derek sent me another text, this one with far less bravado than usual. "Staying at Connor's basement for a bit. Should be fine." Whatever. I looked at the photo he included. A bare concrete wall, a sagging couch, a pile of clothes in the corner. He had gone from calling the police on me to living in a basement within 2 weeks. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel guilt either. This was who he had always been underneath the privilege of my labor. Lydia's downfall deepened too. A friend messaged me that Lydia's name was removed from a student group email chain. Then another person mentioned that she had been turned down for a spot in a community college because of her outstanding balance. Even my parents experienced the social consequences. Their neighbors stopped by to ask what was happening. Their church group reached out with concerned but uncomfortable questions. Eventually, people they tried to impress, people they told embellished stories to, people they bragged to about their perfect children all began to step back. They could not hide behind my financial support anymore. They could not pretend to be self-sustaining. They could not plaster over every crack with my checking account. One night, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker across the pavement, I felt a sense of calm settle in. Not happiness at their suffering, not vindication, just peace. A truth that had taken years to accept finally felt real. Their consequences were not punishments. They were the natural result of choices. Choices repeated, choices ignored, choices denied. For the first time, they were living in the world they built for themselves. And for the first time, I was not cleaning up behind them. It was painful, but it was necessary. It was the only way any of us would grow. They were learning a lesson they had avoided their entire lives. And I was learning one too. You cannot save people from consequences without sacrificing yourself to them. I set my cup down and leaned back in my chair, letting the night air cool my skin. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "They cannot avoid this, and I do not have to carry it." The strangest part about stepping back from my family was not the silence or the backlash or the collapse. It was the growth that came after quiet and unexpected, arriving in small ways that felt almost unreal at first. I woke up one morning about a week after Derek's eviction and Lydia's academic fallout to a phone buzzing on my nightstand. I reached for it with the same instinctive dread I had built over years, expecting another guilt-soaked message or a fresh crisis waiting to be dumped at my feet. But the notification was not from them. It was an email from my job. "Harper, we have an opening for a senior night shift coordinator. You're our strongest candidate. Think about it. Let me know." I sat up slowly, blinking at the screen. A promotion. A chance to step into something that recognized my effort and reliability instead of draining it. I reread the email 5 times, letting it settle in my chest like warm sunlight. For once, the weight on my shoulders was changing shape, going from burden to possibility. I got out of bed, made myself a real breakfast instead of grabbing a protein bar on the way to the car like usual, and sat at the small kitchen table I rarely used. My apartment felt different. Not bigger, not fancier, but mine in a way it had never been before. My phone buzzed again, and this time I expected bad news. But instead, it was another email, this one from an unfamiliar address. From Dr. Melanie Ruiz, subject position filled. I opened it cautiously. It was short. "Hi, Lydia. We reviewed your application for the receptionist position but have chosen another candidate. Thank you for your interest." I stared at it before realizing what it meant. Lydia had actually applied for a job. A real job. One of the listings I put in front of her. She had tried. She failed. But she tried. And the fact that she had mistakenly sent the rejection to me told me everything. She was spiraling, overwhelmed, unorganized, and probably embarrassed. But she was trying. For the first time in her adult life, she was trying to stand on her own legs instead of sitting on mine. I swallowed hard, the feeling complicated. Pride, sadness, disbelief, relief. A strange mix I did not know where to place. I did not reply. It wasn't my place to fix it. It was hers. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around my neighborhood. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and the breeze carried the faint smell of fresh-cut grass. Normal things I never stopped to notice before. My phone stayed in my pocket silent, not weighing me down like a chain anymore. I walked past a small bookstore I had always meant to visit and finally stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly, and I wandered through aisles lined with old paperbacks and new hardcovers with glossy jackets. I picked up a novel by an author I used to love in college but hadn't read in years. The simple act of standing there choosing something for myself felt almost rebellious. That night, I lit a candle on my coffee table, something lavender-scented, soft and calming. I took a slow breath and realized I could not remember the last time I did something like that without feeling guilty for relaxing when my family was falling apart. The next day brought another surprise. A text from an unknown number. "Hey, got the job at the warehouse, starting Monday. Don't make it a big thing. Derek." I read the message 3 times. He had found work, real work, not glamorous, not easy, but honest. The kind of work millions of people do every day without complaint. For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Derek had always been the loud one, the arrogant one, the one who saw every inconvenience as a personal attack. But now, he was doing something none of us expected. He was adjusting, growing. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because this was his milestone, not mine. And I knew if I replied, he would twist it into something. Praise, pity, judgment, whatever suited him in the moment. Silence was kinder. Silence was safer. 2 days later, I ran into Lydia by accident at the grocery store. I was standing in the produce section comparing prices on berries when someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned and found her standing there in light blue scrubs, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, softer, less inflated by the privilege I once gave her. She swallowed hard. "Hi." Her voice cracked slightly. I blinked, taken off guard. "Hi." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other like she was afraid I might run, or that she might. Then she spoke quickly as if the words might dissolve if she hesitated. "I got a job, reception at a dental office. They needed someone fast, so they hired me on probation." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for something. Approval, judgment, maybe forgiveness. I kept my voice steady, gentle. "That's good. I hope it goes well for you." She nodded quickly, eyes suddenly shiny. "It's hard. Like, actually hard. I never realized how much stuff costs or how exhausting it is to work all day and come home and still have things to do." I said nothing. She pushed a breath-out voice, trembling. "I thought you were being dramatic about everything, but you weren't. You were right. We needed this." I felt something tighten in my chest, not painful but tender. A part of me had waited years for words like that, even though I never thought I'd hear them. I nodded once. "I'm glad you're trying." She bit her lip, looked like she wanted to hug me, then decided against it. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the dairy aisle, and I watched her go with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Growth was painful. For all of us. Later that night, while sitting on my couch with the lavender candle flickering nearby, I checked my email again. Another message from my supervisor. "Let me know about the promotion by Friday. We really want you for the role." I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the possibilities unfold in my mind. More pay, more stability, more control over my schedule. A step forward. A life not defined by reacting to crises. A life built intentionally. I wrote back, "I'm interested. Let's talk." My hands trembled not from fear, but from something like excitement. I set the phone aside and leaned back, letting the quiet fill the room. A quiet that did not feel threatening anymore. It felt peaceful, earned. The next morning brought one more surprise. A message from my mother. This one was short. "We are meeting with a financial counselor tomorrow, trying to figure things out." I stared at the screen, barely believing the words. My parents, sitting in a financial counselor's office, saying the sentence trying to figure things out. It was almost surreal. I did not reply. I did not need to. Their words said enough. They were finally confronting the reality they had ignored for years, and I was finally watching from the outside without being dragged in. That evening, I made myself dinner. Something simple but warm. I turned on music. Soft jazz filling the apartment. I felt my breath settle into a natural rhythm, no longer tight or defensive. Growth was everywhere now. Small, quiet, unpredictable. Derek working in a warehouse. Lydia in scrubs answering phones. My parents sitting in a financial counselor's office holding paperwork they probably never imagined reading. And me, learning how to live without dread as a default setting, learning how to enjoy a candle, a walk, a book, a full night's sleep, learning how to show up for myself instead of bleeding myself dry for others. The world had not changed dramatically, but the balance had shifted. The center of gravity had finally moved, and for the first time it moved toward me. Quiet healing does not arrive like a sunrise. It does not pour into your life all at once, warming every cold place. It comes slowly in careful pieces and small shifts that you do not even recognize at first. It happened that way for me. Not with fireworks, not with dramatic victories, but with stillness. Real stillness. The kind that settles in your bones after years of bracing for impact. The first sign arrived on a Monday morning. I woke up before my alarm and didn't feel dread curling in my stomach. The apartment was soft and quiet, morning light spreading across my bedroom floor like a gentle hand. I sat up slowly, stretching, realizing my shoulders were not clenched the way they had been for years. There was no buzzing phone demanding my attention, no chaos waiting for me, no guilt waiting to swallow me whole. I poured myself coffee and stood by the window, watching a couple walk their dog down the sidewalk. For once, I wasn't too exhausted or too emotionally drained to notice the simple calm of a neighborhood waking up. After breakfast, I took out a notebook, something I hadn't touched in years, and wrote out a small list for the week. Not tasks for anyone else, not emergencies, not bills I needed to cover for someone who refused to grow. Just simple things for myself. Try a new cafe. Go to the farmer's market on Saturday. Call Kara from work about the yoga class she recommended. Finish the book I bought last week. It felt strange to write things that were not tied to survival or damage control. But it felt good too. The next few days followed the same pattern. I worked my shifts, came home, cooked dinner, and watched a show without feeling guilty for resting. I didn't keep my phone on loud anymore. I didn't check it every 10 minutes. I didn't jump every time it buzzed. One night, I even turned it off entirely, something I had never done as an adult. The silence felt like being wrapped in a blanket. Peaceful. Safe. By Friday, I decided to take myself out. Not to a big restaurant. Not somewhere fancy. Just a local coffee shop downtown that had a quiet reading corner by the window. I ordered a caramel latte, sat by the glass, and opened my book. The woman at the next table caught my eye and smiled politely. I smiled back. Something about that moment felt human, like I was participating in the world instead of surviving in it. The next morning at the farmer's market, I wandered between stalls of fresh fruit flowers and homemade candles. A cheerful vendor convinced me to smell a jar of something citrus-scented, and I bought it on the spot. I brought home a small bouquet of sunflowers and placed them in a mason jar on my kitchen table. When I stepped back to look at them, I realized something that startled me. My home finally looked like someone lived there. Not someone hiding, not someone drowning. Someone living. A few days later, the universe handed me something unexpected. I had just finished a night shift when I stopped by the grocery store. My hair was messy, my scrubs wrinkled, and all I wanted was a bottle of iced tea. As I turned the corner toward the checkout lanes, I saw her. Lydia. She was standing by the freezer section holding a bag of salad mix. Her eyes tired but alert, her hair pulled back neatly, her scrubs clean and professional. She looked steady, not flustered, not frantic, just steady. When she spotted me, her body froze for a second, like she wasn't sure whether to run or smile. Finally, she walked toward me slowly, offering a tiny, hesitant wave. I didn't move away. She stopped, a foot from me, took a breath, and spoke with an honesty I never expected from her. I wanted to say thank you. My brow lifted in surprise. She continued, her voice soft but firm. I did not understand before. Any of it. How hard it was. How exhausting. How much you were doing. She looked down briefly, then back up at me. But working every day, paying my own bills, showing up for myself, I get it now. It is hard, but it feels good too. Her eyes glistened, not with manipulation this time, but something raw and genuine. I nodded once. I am glad you are doing better, Lydia. A breath escaped her like she had been holding it for days. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what you carried. I let her words sit between us warm and fragile. We stood there for a few seconds, two adults who had finally stopped pretending. There was no hug, no dramatic reconciliation, but there was something better: respect, growth, understanding. She gave me a small smile, nodded again, and walked toward the registers. I watched her go and felt something inside me loosen, a small knot untangling itself. That night when I got home, I lit the citrus candle from the farmer's market and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. I let the scent drift through the room, soft and clean, filling the space, the way relief was filling my chest. Healing did not mean forgetting. It meant recognizing the difference between what hurt and what helped, between who drained me and who could grow, between the past I carried and the future I was building. The next week, I accepted the promotion. My supervisor shook my hand and told me, "You deserve this. You've earned it." I felt the truth in her words. For once, I believed them. With the raise that came with the new position, I allowed myself to do something small but symbolic. I bought a set of fresh linens, white, smooth, clean. I changed my sheets and made my bed neatly, the corners tucked in sharp and crisp. It felt like wiping a slate clean. One evening, I decided to try the yoga class Kara recommended. I rolled out a mat in the back corner, feeling awkward at first, but as the instructor guided us through slow stretches and breathing, something in me softened. For 30 full minutes, my mind was quiet. My breath was steady. My body felt like mine again. After class on the walk home, fireflies flickered across the sidewalk, tiny sparks of light in the dark. I watched one land on a bush and pulse softly before disappearing into the night. I realized healing looked exactly like that. Small, brief, glowing, but real. A week later, I stood on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights reflect across the pavement. I thought about Derek working night shifts at the warehouse. I thought about Lydia answering phones in scrubs that were probably too big for her, but worn with pride. I thought about my parents sitting in a financial counselor's office, doing something they had never done before, facing reality. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for any of it. I didn't feel resentment either. Only balance, only space, only a quiet acceptance that everyone was finally walking on their own path, and I was walking on mine. The past still existed. The wounds still existed. But they were no longer the whole story. They were chapters, and I was finally writing a new one. Closure is not a moment. It is a series of quiet recognitions, like stepping stones leading you out of a place you once believed you would never escape. For me, it did not arrive with applause or forgiveness or some sweeping family reunion. It arrived in pieces, in shifts, in truths spoken softly, and in consequences that finally unmistakably fell where they belonged. It began on a Thursday morning when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. For months, peace had been built on the freedom of not needing to jump at every alert. But something nudged me to pick up. A calm male voice introduced himself as a representative from the auto shop across town. "Just calling to confirm pickup," he said. "Derek came in today, bought a used truck, paid the down payment in full, looks like he got steady hours now." My breath caught for a moment, not because I was proud exactly, not because everything was magically healed, but because the man had done something he had avoided his entire adult life. He stood on his own 2 feet. He earned. He paid. He showed up for himself instead of assuming I would show up for him. When I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and let that reality settle in. Not with triumph, not with bitterness. Just quiet acknowledgement of a shift long overdue. Later that same afternoon, another email came. This one from my mother. No subject line, no guilt, no sweetness hiding venom, just a flyer attached for a community food drive. Underneath it, she had typed a single sentence: "Share if you want. We're helping organize it." I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the meaning sink in. My mother, who once refused volunteer work because it was beneath her, was now chopping vegetables and sorting donations at the community kitchen. I did not reply immediately. I let the moment breathe. I forwarded the flyer to a coworker who liked participating in events like that and moved on with my day. Not out of spite, because for the first time, I was not required to fix anything for her. A few days later, I was grocery shopping when I noticed an older couple staring at me near the cereal aisle, whispering, curious. It took me a moment to realize who they were. Friends of my parents, people who had attended endless holiday dinners, people who had once clucked their tongues at me for not contributing enough, dressed nice enough, smiled enough. They approached slowly, cautiously, as if coming near a wild animal. "How are you, Harper dear?" the woman asked. I gave a polite smile. "I'm well." The man cleared his throat awkwardly. "We heard about everything. Quite the whirlwind, huh? That was one word for it. Years of being used, mocked, drained, shoved into silence, and then blamed for the fallout. A whirlwind, sure. But I didn't say that. I simply nodded. Sometimes families need to learn things the hard way," he added. His voice held no judgment, just understanding. And I realized in that moment that the old narrative had shifted. I was no longer the problem child. I was the one who found my footing after being buried for years. The shame no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the people who had handed it to me. The world kept confirming that shift. My cousin texted me one night to say, "Your dad's been bragging about his forklift certification like it's a medal. He's acting like he got it all on his own." I laughed softly, not unkindly. Maybe he needed to feel that way. Maybe he needed something to point to that wasn't failure disguised as pride. And Lydia kept showing up in places I least expected. One afternoon, I saw her across the local cafe through the window. She was in scrubs again, listening intently as an older woman explained something on a clipboard. Lydia nodded, took notes, asked questions. She looked focused, present, not pretending to be someone she wasn't, not performing for an audience. She was building something real for herself for the first time. I didn't go inside. I didn't interrupt her. Growth belongs to the person doing it, not the person watching. Justice, I realized, didn't always come with dramatic punishment or grand endings. Sometimes justice looked like accountability, like a family finally carrying the weight they had dumped onto me for years, like people being forced to face the consequences they once insistently handed to someone else. But one final moment came, the kind that settled everything into place. It happened on a blue-skied Sunday morning when I decided to walk through Cherokee Park for the first time since the infamous picnic. The air smelled like cut grass. Kids were running near the playground. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. I followed the path until I reached the tables where it had all happened, where Derek's smirk had cut me, where my mother had laughed, where Lydia filmed me like I was a joke, where everything began to crack open. I thought sitting there would trigger something painful, maybe anger, maybe regret, maybe shame seeping back into the cracks. But instead, I felt something new. Distance. That moment was still mine, but it no longer owned me. I sat for a long time, breathing in the scent of pine and warm earth. Then I stood ready to leave when I heard footsteps behind me. A familiar voice said my name. I turned. Derek stood there, hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans, shoulders tense, like he didn't know if he should be here. He looked different, older somehow, tired but grounded. He lifted a hand in an awkward half-wave. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Me neither," I replied. He stepped closer, stopping a good distance away. "I'll keep it short," he said. "I just wanted to say—" He hesitated. The words caught on something heavy in his throat. "I was awful to you, for a long time, and you didn't deserve that." I felt the earth tilt just slightly beneath my feet. Derek had never apologized, not for the shove, not for the years of insults, not for the chaos he created. He exhaled. "I get it now. Responsibility. Bills. Showing up when it's hard. It changes a person, makes you rethink things." I didn't respond. I let him continue. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to hear that from me once. That's all." I nodded once, a slow, steady motion. "Thank you, Derek." He looked relieved in a way that surprised me, like saying it released something he had carried just as long as I carried my own wounds. He gave another quick nod and walked away, heading toward the parking lot where a battered but functional truck waited for him. As I watched him go, something loosened in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but release, letting the past stop strangling the present. When I returned home, I made tea and opened my journal. I wrote down 3 simple sentences. I showed up for myself. They showed up for themselves. The cycle is broken. And in that moment, I felt justice settle quietly into place, not like a verdict, but like a sunrise. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Later that evening, as the sun lowered behind the rooftops, my phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. "Hope you're well. We thought maybe next month we could have dinner. No money needed. Just you." I sat with the message for a long time, not rushing, not reacting, just breathing. I typed slowly, deliberately. Maybe. Let's talk soon. I hit send. I did not owe them my life anymore, but I could choose what I shared. Choice. That word again. The one I had tasted in the drive-thru months ago. Warm and soft, the first nourishing thing I had given myself in years. And as the last light faded, I whispered the sentence that had rewritten everything. They thought humiliating me in public would break me. Instead, it broke the system that was breaking me. And for the first time in my life, I showed up for myself. If you are still here with me, take a breath for a moment and really sit with this story, because what happened to Harper is something far too many people know in their bones, even if they have never said it out loud. Maybe you have been the one who always showed up, the one who covered the bill, the one who put your own needs on a shelf because someone else convinced you theirs mattered more. Maybe you know exactly what it feels like to be laughed at by the same people who were perfectly happy to cash the checks you quietly sent. Or maybe you have lived that moment when you finally said no and the world around you shook because they were never expecting you to stand up. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a chapter you survived or a chapter you are still fighting through, I want you to know this. You are not alone, and you are not the villain for choosing yourself. People love to preach about family until it is their turn to give instead of take. People love to call you selfish the second you stop bleeding for them. But there comes a day when you look at your life and realize the weight you have been carrying was never yours to begin with. And when you finally put it down, the silence that follows is not abandonment. It is peace. So let me ask you, wherever you are watching this, from what would you have done in Harper's shoes? Would you have walked away sooner? Would you have confronted them? Would you have gone silent and let the consequences speak for themselves? I want to hear your story, your version of that moment when enough finally became enough. Drop it in the comments, even if it is just one sentence, even if it is just a whisper of something you have held inside for years. You never know who might see your words and feel less alone because of them. And before you scroll, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing this little community show up from all across the United States and everywhere else in the world. If you have ever broken a family cycle, if you have ever crawled your way out of being the default caregiver, the fixer, the bank account, the quiet one who absorbs all the chaos, hit the like button so this video reaches someone who needs it. And if you want more stories that speak to the complicated truth of family, of betrayal, of resilience, of the quiet kind of strength people overlook until it explodes into clarity, make sure you subscribe. We tell real stories here. Stories that sting, stories that heal, stories that remind you that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival. It is dignity. It is hope. And if no one has told you this today, let me be the one to say it. You deserve peace. You deserve rest. You deserve a life that is not built on carrying everyone else. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you for being part of a community where telling the truth is finally allowed. Now it is your turn. What would you have done?